Hi, I'm Streaky, this is Metropolis Mastering, and this is Shea from ACM. Today we're discussing signal flow. Compression, EQ, EQ, compression, compression, EQ, compression, EQ.
EQ, compression, EQ.
You get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we go?
Yeah.
I'm quite tall compared to you though, that's the only problem.
Bit tall. Oh, that's good. Is that about right?
Yeah, I feel like a midget now.
That's right. Yes,
Okay, so when I decide where I'm putting things in the chain, I usually stick to a very similar chain because I've got that sound and I know that sound, so I know how to work quickly. So I tend to have an EQ first in my chain, and in this chain actually my EQ first is an MS EQ, but I can switch it to a stereo EQ as well. So I tend to have that in there, so it's a little bit more versatile as an EQ to kind of, because really what I'm trying to do in my first EQ, in fact I haven't got that first, I've got the backs first, because what I'm trying to do when I first get into doing something is to try and sort out a few problems, or any, not problems, but things that I want to get right before, to get me in the ballpark. I've talked before about getting myself in the ballpark and then tweaking. So to get myself in the ballpark, I'll go through an EQ first and sort of, you know, rebalance the track if I need to. That's why the backs is very handy. And then I'll, you know, maybe add some more bass, take some top off. Don't usually try and take the top off because it, you know, dulls it and it's not good. So I'm kind of sorting out the main area first of all and getting into it. Then I'll bang a compressor on. So I've got various options. Maselec. I usually use the multi-band next actually, because again what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the bass, or I'm, you know, making sure it's not too SE or things like that. So I've already got a de-esser up the front of the chain. I hope you're still following.
Yeah.
But so I'm de-essing first. I'm sorting out problems before I get to a compressor. Then I'm going through a multi-band to sort of get that. I'm not using all these all at the same time, obviously. Sometimes I might not use them. But this is in the worst case scenario where the track sounds shocking and you're trying to, you know, trying to rescue it, if you like. So if you had it all in, I go kind of, you know, high frequency limiting, some hardcore EQ, balancing, maybe some MS EQ. So I'm EQing first, then I'm compressing. Let's get to the point.
Yeah.
And then I can EQ again, and then I can then go through another compressor, which is the Avalon or the Manly, to kind of warm it up, and then I'll have a final EQ at the end to sort of open it up. You know, sometimes when you compress, it tightens everything up, and although it's bringing it together and gluing it together or warming it up, it sometimes leaves it a little bit flat. So I might chop back into it again with an EQ, or add a little top, or, you know, whatever it needs to be done at that point. Because
finesse.
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of like just polish it off at the end. But, you know, like I say, I'm not using everything at once. Sometimes it can be fun, but a lot of the times when you use everything, you kind of look at it again and go,
do I need that?
Do I need that? And you start popping things out and going round in circles. So a lot of the time you kind of try not to, but that's kind of how I'm working. So I'm EQ, compression, EQ, compression, EQ.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And varying amounts of those. So I might have 2 EQs first, I might have two compressors, 2 EQs, blah, blah. So that's what I do for mastering. That's my signal flow, that's my chain. And that makes it very easy and versatile for me to get the kind of sound that I want, because as I'm putting it together I can then reopen it, or as I'm trying to correct like massive errors, then I'm fine.
Yeah.
So how do you work? I mean,
kind of the same, but it's a general rule. So my rule would be I EQ before I compress.
This is for mixing or production? Or
for mixing, for everything. It comes down to mixing over a full track. It comes down to single elements in a mix. It comes down to producing, choosing the right samples in the first place and the right sounds. But even if I do have the right sounds, at every kind of stage, if I'm going to compress something, I'll EQ it before I compress it. And
why not compress it first of all? Why wouldn't you just sort of like grab the sound? Say it's a kick drum. Why wouldn't you just smash it and hold, like sort of really grab all that sound together first of all, and then chop into it?
Because there could be a really nice area or a really honky area that doesn't sound too bad in the actual sample, but then if I've got an EQ first, which is pure utility, it's just I'm not trying to gain sort of colour out of the EQ on the first one. It's just so I can pull in the low end a little bit. I can make sure if there's like a honky frequency, sort of low mid frequency, I can kind of notch that out because I know when I compress it, or I'm going to compress it, that kind of stuff is going to be exaggerated more. So it's like a surgical type of EQ to get me ready to compress before I even think about compressing. And then
so
after
you're
that,
so you're not kind of pulling all the nasty stuff
areas
together.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's getting rid of the nasty stuff out of the sound of whatever instrument it is.
Of course.
First of all.
Yeah, and then once it's compressed.
Well, but even if you're recording that, so even at a recording stage, you'll do that rather than. You know, just to get it into the bit of equipment and then sort it out later in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, as far as recording's concerned, like recording a vocal, as much as I can do to tape, like, well, not literally to tape, but as much as I can do to print, like to actually record before plugins, the better. Like, if I can get away with recording something really well and then having an EQ compressor, then an EQ again afterwards, and just kind of that with minimal differences in each one, minimal changes, I'm happy, rather than a rubbish vocal and then having to use an EQ, then a compressor, then another EQ, then two more EQs and a compressor, and trying to glue all these bits together.
Yeah.
I would do my EQing and compressing on the way in, so it sounds good as printed, so I have to do less later, but it's still the same flow. EQ first, then compress. I'd never compress.
Which is kind of what I always think, is that if you get the basics right first of all, then there's less work for everybody down the chain.
Yeah, and you're going to get a cleaner
So by the time you get to me, I don't have to do anything.
Basically, you just got to turn it up.
Which is a joy. But that doesn't happen that often. You know, when it does, it's great. But then you're thinking to yourself, surely I must have to do more to this than this. But it sounds great. What am I doing?
I just think in theory, as well in practice, like I kind of got it from you. I kind of got it from like watching what you're doing and seeing that you kind of tidy something up before you think about compressing it, rather than just slam it and then just worry about it afterwards. It's like
Does that mean I'm on points for any work that you carry out?
I don't know. I don't think so. No. It's the sculpting beforehand and sort of like refining a sound beforehand, then compress it, and then get the most out of that compressor. And I found once I started doing that, the sound of what I thought it was going to sound like after compression is what it sounded like, rather than compressing first, and it sounded nothing like I thought it was going to.
And then you're fighting against what you've compressed.
Yeah, and then you're EQing out an area that could have been
with a once you've compressed it, you've compressed it. It's kind of done.
Yeah,
isn't it?
It's like you're trying to EQ a compressed area that if you'd have taken the time beforehand to sculpt that little area out, you wouldn't be having to surgically EQ it afterwards. I find if I do my surgical first or my utility EQ first, then compress however the hell I want to do it because it's ready for me to do that. Then afterwards do that finesse stage where I can, and it's on a sample basis.
Exactly the same as what I've just explained.
Kind of, pretty much. But it's on every single step. Like when I'm picking a kick drum, I'll pick a good kick drum hopefully, but then there'll be bits that I'd want to make it sound better than just the sample that was in there.
Once you've also then drawn up the rest of the mix, you've then got to do the same approach with that.
Same thing on a mix bus. It's like on a mix bus, I wouldn't just put a compressor over the whole mix bus. It would have some EQ beforehand, then go out to some compression, and then come back in and do the finesse thing again. Where it's more broader strokes or not as higher or lower dB. I'm normally more dB cuts on the utility one than the finesse one. Yeah,
which is kind of the way it works all the way up the chain, because by the time you get to mastering, you're doing half dB steps. Yeah. Whereas when you're recording, you're doing 5 dB steps.
When you're producing, I could be like compressing 9-10 dB. Compressing just to get that characteristic, which which is something you're not going to possibly do on the Manly or on the Manly or the Master. You're not taking off 8.
No, I'm not taking off 1.
Yeah, but on like production stage, it's still the same signal flow, but it's just harder, harder amounts. But it's good. We sort of agree on it's EQ, compress EQ.
That's not how this video is supposed to work, though.
I know. Yeah, it's supposed to.
I'm supposed to be having a row with you about
it. But I mean, like I said before, it's only generally because I kind of watch what you're doing.
So the general rule works, and then you've seen how I do it, so then you've reapplied that to the earlier stages, and it works in the same way. You do. Good.
And I stole. It works. That's the thing. It works well, and it's like beforehand. Before I sort of stole everything, it went from I just stick a compressor on it. It would sound good with a
Right.
compressor on it,
Yeah.
and then worry about what that compressor had done afterwards with EQ.
Yeah.
But then when I started to EQ first and then compress, it was like, oh, that's the sound I want. Fine. If I want to finesse that in any way, I can, because the artifacts that would have been there without EQ beforehand
Yeah.
are not there. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, EQ, compress, EQ, I find. Utility, compression, finesse.
Yeah. So really, it's like the way should be using compressors, which everyone doesn't understand, I don't think, is that you should be using them for flavour and for just sort of bringing out certain elements rather than using them for part of the sound.
Yeah,
Because a lot of the sound can come from the EQ in conjunction with the compressor, but a compressor on its own is very difficult to use, where I would rather not have any compression and just EQ, just because I can get that sound just from an EQ.
Yeah, you find that more you go from starting a track, like the production stage of it, you're throwing stuff at it, do you know what I mean, to get the tone and get those sounds and everything out of your equipment and like the plugins.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the mix stage, it's like, okay, not as much, same sort of stuff, but not as much.
Just back
and then
it
get
off,
to
back
mastering
it off,
stage,
back
it's
it
like
off.
tiny, back it off.
Yeah.
Whereas at the start, I could be throwing, like I said, 10 dB gain reduction.
Which also comes back to why I always think it's very difficult to be the mix engineer and the mastering engineer, because
especially on the same project.
Well, yeah, because you're taking that approach of like smashing stuff, not smashing it, but like maybe 3, 4, 5 dB, and then it's very hard to then come at it with nothing after that,
with a complete clear mind.
Yeah, and think that it's going to be right.
Yeah.
But okay, cool. I hope that explains how I use my signal flow and how he stole my signal flow
Basically.
to make his own signal flow.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, thanks for watching. Put your comments in there, and any questions you want.
I think subscribe's there now. Is that going to be right?
It's up there.
Is it?
Yeah,
It's up there.
It's always up there. It's much easier to edit.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye.